Hey everyone, I'm Matt,
I'm Deanna.
and welcome back to Chasing Balance. In this episode, we're talking about balancing the expectations of your children. So, balancing the expectations that you have for your children. I think before we do that, we need to dive into what the weight of expectations have on the children and what kids go through, kind of listing off the expectations that we have for them.
Mhm.
One being academic expectations,
Yeah.
meaning the expectations that we put on our kids as far as grades go. Um, that we expect that there's a certain grade level that they need to hit or succeed in class.
Yeah. And I mean that's different for each of those age ranges. We
Yes.
have higher expectations for the older kid because it's more social and 7th grade is, a time where you can leave the classroom and go to the next classroom. Like it's
Right.
that first year where they have different periods. And then there's that social aspect. So we have a lot more stronger academic expectations for him than we do for obviously the 4-year-olds, where
It's just like the
those
grading system too, though.
yeah,
There's
yes.
not really a grading system for the younger kids, whereas there is it?
And I mean, I just push survival skills.
On
Like
the
those,
younger ones,
yes,
don't eat
those,
glue,
yeah.
don't eat marbles, don't stick anything
Be
in your nose.
kind,
Yes.
stand up for
Yeah.
yourself, talk to people.
Yep. So that's the academic expectations. Then they also go through extracurricular
Mhm.
expectations as far as sports, music, band, whether they're join a club, chess club, or acting.
Yep.
Then they also have their social expectations, how we expect them to act with their friends,
With their friends' parents, with
their teachers,
yeah,
how we expect them to act out in public when we are
not
away
present.
from them.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, then we have their appearance expectations. Now, two of our children, our youngest, they go to an academy um, where their clothes are picked out for them. They wear the same thing every day for the entire school year, for the most part.
Yes, they have a uniform. They wear a different uniform every day, but
Right. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. They don't wear the same exact clothes every single day.
just want to make
Right.
that clear.
And then our oldest, this is his second year in public schools.
Mhm.
We thought that would be better for his growth and education actually over the academy. And he does get to it was kind of shocking because he does get to pick what he gets to wear. So it's kind of new to him that he doesn't have a uniform basically laid out for him every single day. Um, and it started off a little rough, not really kind of putting himself
Yeah,
together. Uh,
it was a bit of an experiment.
yeah. So the thing that I told him is that when you wake up and you go out, especially in public, to a job or to school, that you should be looking, feeling, and smelling like $1,000,000. And I think
Mhm.
that after I put that in his head, it kind of stuck with him. And he's been
In a
improving
good
on that
way.
in a good way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then the last thing, but not least, is emotional expectations.
Yeah. Obviously, we can't really hold a lot of that with the 4-year-olds because it's an emotional time bomb.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but we do have emotional expectations for our older kiddos and
Mhm.
making sure that it's not just temper tantrum based. Like if you everybody has emotions, express those emotions in
Mhm.
the right way and make it concise and like deliberate and show your standpoint instead of throwing a fit and crying.
Right.
And
Talk
what
talk about it.
yes. I mean, one that's appropriate. Sometimes, if crap happens, crying is the most appropriate response.
Right.
But talking through that and really so that we're either a source of you venting or a source of you helping, like helping.
So speaking of crying, how have we seen these expectations, these 4 or 5 expectations that we just spoke about, do we see how that they're overwhelming? I see it with our oldest,
Mhm.
Preston, more than I see it with the younger 2. The middle one, you don't see it too much. The younger one, obviously, he's 4, so everything is emotional, whether it comes to naps, ice cream, anything. But
If you
what
can't have a granola
yeah,
bar.
if he can have a granola bar in his bed right before bedtime or
Yeah,
something.
so if you can't fit something in a backpack and zip it up,
Yeah.
that's twice the size of the
So
backpack.
that's expected.
Yes.
And I guess we should think that it's expected for our oldest too, that is 12,
Yeah.
um, where he carries himself with composure all day long, gets his homework done, good grades, focuses on sports when he needs to, goes to practice, very rarely any complaining about that. But then there's just times at the end of the day where he just loses it,
Yeah.
whether it's yelling or crying, and it kind of just blows us away. But it's also kind of eye-opening once we're started talking about these things and writing these show notes. The reason why this stuff is overwhelming.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be a lot on his brain, but also a lot has to do with the fact that he's 12 and those hormones are just son of
Crazy.
a bitch.
Yeah, it's kind of there's sometimes where he just goes off and you just want to go lock yourself in another room. You're so scared.
Yeah.
I'm
What?
joking.
No.
It's not that bad.
It's really not. It's not like we live with the Hulk, but it kind of is like a Hulk question.
So every single kid, every single family is different. Obviously, we're going to raise our kids hopefully better than our parents raised us, and
Yeah.
that's not a knock on them.
No.
Just that you learn throughout the process what worked for you as a kid, what you didn't like as a kid. There's a hell of a lot of stuff that I let our kids do that I was never able to do,
Yeah.
even as far as listening to, rap music with swear words in it. Um,
There was a lot of things that I was allowed to do that I don't let my children do.
okay. So every family and child is different. So you just have to find the right balance. And the right balance is it's not one size fits all.
No.
So what works for us and what we talk about in this show doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for you, but maybe we'll say something that kind of triggers something and you think, wow, I never thought about that and maybe I should try it. So going over the contrasting perspectives, let's start with the pros first, or I'm sorry, the point of view one, which is the case of pushing your kids. The case of, your kid doesn't want to go to football practice, they don't want to go to baseball, they don't want to try out for the soccer team, they don't want to try out acting, they don't want to do anything else, let alone, go to school. So one of the things while we were writing the show is that um, a quote or a podcast came up from the St. Brown podcast where they had their dad on, and their dad's name is John Brown. He has a podcast, by the way. His the podcast name is Black Coffee with John Brown, and then his sons have a podcast called the St. Brown Podcast. If you're not familiar with the St. Brown name, Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the top paid wide receivers in the NFL, and he plays for the Detroit Lions.
Yes. He's amazing.
His brother, EQ, plays for the New Orleans Saints as a wide receiver. His other brother, these are all brothers, played college on a scholarship and had a foot injury. If that foot injury wouldn't have came about, he also, more than likely, would have been drafted into the NFL.
Yeah.
His dad set expectations for his kids. Mr. John Brown set expectations for all 3 of his kids that when they came home from school, they had a set schedule. They went and they worked out with their dad. They did their homework. They ate. They did their chores, all that stuff. Um, and look what happened with, John Brown pushing his kids setting expectations for them, and he potentially had 3 children
Yeah.
grow up raised and grow into and be drafted into the NFL. So one of the things I pulled from their podcast, the St. Brown podcast, talking about how it is up to the parents to push their kids, and it's not up to the children to make their call. So here is that little snippet from the podcast.
It's up to mom and dad. It's not up to the kid. So I'm not gonna name names, but one of your buddies, and his dad is my friend. His son should have went to the NFL. He didn't. His dad was a great NFL player, but his dad was he was the exception, not the rule. His dad made it on his own. No one helped his dad. So his dad has a son. He thinks, well, no one helped me. Do it yourself. You got to really want it. No, that's the exception. That's not the rule. The rule is you as a mom and dad have to help your kids. If you don't help your kids get a scholarship, that coach is not going to get your son a scholarship. Don't listen to them when they tell you that. They told me, I got them scholarships for y'all, right? Mm-hmm. But guess what? All the coaches said they did, but they don't. They don't get them scholarships. Mom and dad got to get them scholarships. So there's a lot of things you have to know. And, you got to go to John Brown Black Coffee, look at my podcast when it comes out, and you'll learn about all this stuff I'm telling you. But you just have to do what I tell you. There's no such thing as lazy kids. Like you said earlier, it's only lazy parents, period.
Lazy parents, period. What do you think about that?
I think it covers the whole extent of it, not just sports related. I think that it covers everything.
Academics as well.
Academics, yeah. Personality, like everything. If you're an absent parent, how could you expect your kid to be successful with anything in life?
Structure and discipline created these 3, well, actually 2, but 3 NFL stars.
Yeah, we can say 3. I mean, he didn't make it because of an injury.
Right.
It's not because he wasn't ready.
He was ready for it. Yeah, I mean, he had a full ride scholarship.
Exactly.
Structure and discipline created these NFL stars off of the back of their parents. Their parents' name John Brown, and their mom's name is Miriam Brown. So all of those things that he talked about, not being a lazy parent, can lead to success. Now, even though that was very motivational, let's talk about the case of letting kids find their own way without the parents pushing. Now, a quote I found states that kids thrive when they're allowed to explore their passions and learn from their own experience. Now, let me say, I have never said you have to do what I'm telling you to do. Do not go and try something new. Just trust me and do what I say. As they get older, what are you laughing about? I have said that, do as I say.
When it comes to like silly things, but yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to rules,
like, I don't think you should drink that chocolate milk that's been sitting out for 4 hours.
So, I mean, even on that stuff, we've done that before. Right. There's some, okay. So so like Max, our youngest, letting them find their way. Absolutely.
Yeah.
4-year-old, he needs to learn his body. He needs to learn what he likes. He needs to learn what's going to be his hobbies. He needs to learn his limitations, everything. As they get older, yes, I want them to find their way.
Yeah.
But I do think that finding their way when they get older, and this is my opinion, is going to be more social oriented than it is going to be academic and sports related. I think that as a 12-year-old, there is still that area where, yes, he can try new things. So if he wanted to come up to me and say, Mom, Dad, I would really like to try the chess club, say, sure, let's do it. But if he doesn't want to do anything, that is when we're going to step in and push in and say, you should try this. You should try this. What about football? What about baseball?
Yeah, I feel like we've always had a pretty set in stone policy that we are doing something, anything.
Yep. We're staying active
during that season.
Yep.
Winter, spring, summer, fall. We are doing something during that season. And whether that is like you said, chess or tennis or
Yep.
whatever. As long as you keep your body moving and you're out there engaged in society and you're learning something new about yourself or learning something like a whole new concept,
Yep.
you got to do it and you have to stick with it. So, I mean, we don't force them to do something that they don't want to do. They have to agree that they're going to do it and stick with it.
Right. We yes. So football. Hell Week was very hard. They do Hell Week with 12-year-olds. And it's very long practices out in the sun, very hot sun. And it came down to a breakdown, and we said you are sticking with it. So it was a voluntary, yes, I'd like to play football, and it was a push of you are sticking with this.
Yeah, you're going to finish the season,
Yep.
whether you like it or not, because you made that commitment and you can't let these kids down, your team down, because you don't feel like you can cut it. And I mean, in that whole entire thing, we did have a long conversation because he's like, I just, it comes with the self-esteem part. And he's like, I just don't think that I'm as good as the other kids.
Yep.
And I don't think I can do it. And, half of these kids know all of the moves and what they're supposed to be doing and blah, blah, blah. And he's like,
it's your first year, bud.
And no,
this
I
is your
told
first
him,
week.
Yeah, I told him flat out, like, if you think that everybody out there is full of confidence, you are sadly mistaken. And then it was
you talked to parents that week, right?
That following week, I talked to parents, and every single one, we did like this very cheesy thing where we had to go around and stand up and introduce ourselves. And every single one of them was like, every single day after practice, they're crying and yada yada yada. And I came home, I was like, do not breathe a word of this, but I got some tea for you, kid.
So we talked about the pros of pushing your kid. We talked about the pros of letting them find their own way. Now let's talk about maybe finding the middle ground.
Yeah.
And one of the stories that come to mind, or the experience that comes to mind for us, is when Preston did baseball last season. So he ended the previous season on a high note. It was his first season starting as a pitcher. Several strikeouts, amazing hits. He was leading his team. I want to say they were either undefeated or they maybe lost like one game. So
they did very well.
They did very well. Very impressed with them. Very proud of them. So in the off season, so we live here in Michigan. It's very cold. There's nothing to do outside in the winter as far as sports go. It's skiing and snowboarding, and we don't do that as of yet. Hopefully in the future. But so we built a little field batting cage in our basement. Little field, little pitching area, pitching machine, all that stuff. It's new, it's shiny, so he used it for the first 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then it just fell by the wayside, and he stopped using it. And we would remind him, why don't you go in the basement and practice? Why don't you go in the basement and practice? Why don't you go in the basement and practice? And we pushed. Yep.
I'm so bored.
And we have this little, in our house, we have this little time frame after dinner that there is an hour to an hour and a half where they cannot do electronics. They have to do their chores, and they have to do something creative or active or something like that. And that's when they can go in the basement and do that type of stuff. So it got to the point, kind of like nagging your kids to do their chores.
Yeah.
It got to the point where it was exhausting, and we stopped pushing it. Well, the next season came. He walked out onto that field, and he lost all of his skills. Not all of them. Most of his skills. And while he was out there on the field, losing his skills, he lost his self-confidence. So it's kind of a middle ground there, us pushing and pushing and pushing, giving him the right, there's kids out there, obviously, with less that still practice.
Yeah.
Giving him the right tools, a freaking batting cage in his basement that I probably would have killed for as a kid.
There's a lot of things that we give our kids. And if I had this when I was your
Right.
age.
Like food.
It's
So,
bad.
so back to the story. He walked off of that field with his eyes basically glued to his cleats. Um, he let himself down. And it was kind of one of those moments like, not really I told you so, but I could feel it that he knew he should have been practicing. So it went from a pushing situation
hmm
to he's getting older, and I got other two kids to be pushing into other things. Let him do what he's going to do. And unfortunately, he figured it out the hard way. So is there a middle ground to that?
I think there is, but just trying to figure out what that middle ground is for that particular kid
Yeah.
is the tricky part. Because I know that at least with our kids, with Preston, it's um, I can't suggest something.
Yeah.
He has to come up with it for him to be really into it. So
Like going to practice or
yeah,
going to run or work out or something like that.
I've discovered that if I just kind of plant a seed,
Mhm.
a thought,
Mhm.
maybe make a off cuff, suggestion to myself, and he picks up on it, and then he thinks that it's his idea,
Yeah.
then he gets into it.
I get it. And I mean, in addition to that, I have noticed that when I work out during the day, he will not work out. But
Yeah.
if I work out at night after he gets home from school, then he comes down and works out with me.
Yeah, you are the bee's knees. He loves hanging out with you. He loves doing all the cool stuff that dad does.
I never understood that though, because we had this, and I still don't understand it, which is probably just dumb on me. But like, you know, the kids can come down here and practice whenever they want, and you can practice by yourself. Like we have a pitching machine
Yeah.
that will pitch to them.
Yeah.
We have a goalie and blockers and all that stuff, and several soccer balls that you could kick into the net. You don't need somebody else there practicing your skills. That's just how I was as a kid. Like if I went to go do something and my little brother didn't want to do it with me, or my dad was off working 12 to 14 hours a day, I would throw the ball on the roof and catch it. I would throw the ball against the wall and
Right.
catch it. I would pretend like there was people there watching me or guarding me if I was playing basketball. That's what I don't understand about, I guess, our kids' minds and how they need to have somebody else down here. It's kind of a little off topic, but
But I
they
mean,
have to practice some with somebody else.
in their defense, I mean, I've been remote since Preston's been born. I've been around all the time.
It's true.
I've been with Braden, and I've been with all of them. And then you've also been alongside and just as present. And I don't know if you know, but you're like super fun to hang out.
Thanks.
So I mean, every situation that the kids are in is like 10 times more enjoyable when dad's there. So it shouldn't limit them. It shouldn't stop them from doing it.
Yeah.
No, but I know that they enjoy it a lot more when you're present, when I'm present. And that's the tricky part because it's like when they get to the point when, and it's like after dinner and we've done a full day of all the parenting chores and all of the house chores and then working and then working out. I don't want to do that.
It's hard.
I don't want to go downstairs and watch a soccer.
You get done working.
Yeah.
You get done cooking dinner, eating dinner. Come down here.
Yeah.
Run anywhere between 3 to 5 miles.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, Dad, you want to play goalie?
I would not.
Yeah. And then you feel like shit because you say
Yeah.
no. So, but going back to the topic of,
We digress.
of finding the middle ground, and I think there is a little bit of finding it to a certain extent that how you said if the kids say they want to do something, then they need to follow through with it.
Yeah.
And we
100%.
push that follow through as much as possible.
I even get to the point where I'm like, you only have 4 more weeks. Is it going to kill you?
Yeah.
No.
And
We're
then at
gonna
the
do
end of the
this. Yeah,
season, they're like, I can't wait to do it again.
exactly.
So,
Exactly.
so let's look at how the long-term impact of both um, can impact your child. So pushing your children that aren't 100% interested in a certain subject, sport, extracurricular activity, anything like that, shows a decrease in self-esteem. Now, I beg to differ with that. Um, Increased stress levels, I can see that, and potential burnout. Um, Burnout, it really just depends on how much is on their plate. So if you're talking about like what, Preston Braden did, like obviously Preston, that was eye-opening with football,
Mhm.
where he had school.
Mhm.
So there was Hell Week, whatever.
Yeah.
You basically go from summer, swimming in the pool, having a relaxing vacation, Hell Week starts, then school starts with football afterwards. So that is a huge
But their Hell Week wasn't at just a week. They started in
2 weeks.
August.
Yeah.
And then school started at the beginning of September.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was 2 full weeks. And then it didn't drop down that much. It dropped down to, instead of
3 hours was like 2.5.
yeah, 2.5, 4 times a week.
So I can see the burnout,
Or 3 times a week.
but kids are resilient.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Now, going back to increased stress, obviously that can be stressful. Some stress, I believe, is healthy to put on kids. And then also self-esteem. So decreased self-esteem being pushed into something that they aren't 100% into. Now, I think that, and yes, these are the cons that we're talking about of pushing them into it, but I think that can be overcome with proper parenting of decreased self-esteem. I understand that not every single kid is going to go out there and be the next Michael Jordan or Amon St. Brown, Messi, whatever it is. But at the end of that practice or that tryout, if they fail, it is up to us as parents to say, have that positive attitude, that positive talk. What'd you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What can we work on? What did you see other kids doing that maybe you should have known before coming into this?
Yeah, and I mean to that point, like for example, Preston
Yep.
finishes the football season,
Yep.
and then basketball tryouts are right after that.
Mhm.
So keep in mind, this child has not touched a basketball in a year, a solid year.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, do you want to do it? It's like, yes, let's do it.
Yep.
And he goes in, and it's 3 days back, or no, 2 days back to back.
Yep.
And it was like 2-hour tryouts each day. And he would come home and he's like, oh, I had a great time. I think I did amazing. This person, this person, this person were there, and blah, blah, blah. We had so much fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then the weekend comes, and then the coach sends out, confirmation if they want you to come back for the final tryout.
Right.
And Preston didn't make the final tryout. I was like, I'm sorry, buddy, you didn't make it to the next tryout. He's like, oh no, it's okay. I had a great time. I had so much fun.
Yeah.
And then he's like, and I got a free workout out of it. I was like, great.
And it's hit or miss.
Yeah.
So he's not always that positive.
No.
The majority of the time he is.
Yes. He is. He's
And
naturally positive, I
right.
think.
And obviously one of his close friends, family friend, kid was in there, and he didn't make it either. And he loves basketball, so that was more crushing to him. So obviously, every single kid is going to be different.
Yeah, and then to that point, Preston was very sympathetic, and he went over and he talked to him the next day.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think the whole idea and the whole entire experience was a positive for him.
Yeah.
Even though he didn't make it.
Now, on the flip side, let's talk about the pros of pushing your kid into things that they aren't 100% agreeable to or want to do. So obviously, pushing anybody, adults, kids, pushing them into something different, something new, will help develop new skills. That will increase them building confidence in themselves, being in a new situation, especially if they succeed. like Preston did with football.
Mm.
It encourages positive habits, being in new situations. It also encourages a strong work ethic for kids, especially as you can see for when school came back in session. There were still 2.5 hour football practices afterwards. So I'm gonna do this question. This really isn't in the show notes. Do you feel you were pushed enough on certain aspects of academics, sports, things of that nature?
Um, I could talk about this for hours on end, but
We don't have hours.
no, we don't have hours. No, I don't think that I was. Academically, I was kind of the child that was left behind, even though there's an act that supports that from not happening. Definitely
Right.
was, yeah.
Yes. Yep.
I was the kid that didn't know how to read correctly, so I was dismissed from a lot of classes. And that had a huge impact on my outcome from a very young age all the way up until I got shifted to a new school district in a new town in high school.
And then they worked with your dyslexia.
Yeah, and at that point in time, I didn't really have a choice of sports. So I would go to school. Um, so that to give you a little bit of context, when I transferred out of my old school district into my new school district, my GPA was I think a 0.95.
A point.
It was extremely
I,
low. I
think,
should not have.
I thought I had a little one.
So I did I went to school full time, obviously. And then when I got home, I went to community college for 3 hours a night
During high school?
during high school.
I didn't know this about you.
And it was for reading and for practical knowledge or something. It was kind of to learn all the things that you were supposed to learn when you were younger, but I didn't. So I would
Because they didn't want to leave you behind.
they left me.
They left you behind.
They locked that door.
Wow.
No, so then I didn't really have a choice of sports for my freshman and sophomore year.
Okay.
And then when I got to be junior, I brought my grades up, and then I had a choice. So then at that point in time, I tried out for hockey.
Yeah.
And my whole family has always been very big into hockey. And during hockey tryouts, I got called over by the coach, and he was like, "Are you related to Steve?"
Great.
And I go, "Yeah, he's my brother." And he goes, "You skate like him." I skated directly off of the ice.
You thought it was negative?
I skated off
negative.
of the ice.
Yeah.
I went over to the bench and I started to unlace my skates. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I just said, "Fuck you." And
Really?
I walked out because I was extremely stubborn as a child, and I didn't want anybody to set expectations for myself that I didn't think that I was going to achieve. And
Wow.
my siblings were above and beyond any sport level that I could ever achieve. So I just nipped it in the bud and stepped.
And your parents didn't push you back in it?
My dad didn't. I got into the car and he asked what happened, and I told him, and he goes, "Okay, all right." And then he didn't push me.
But he did push you academically.
He did. I mean, when so my parents have been divorced since I was 5, right? So when I lived with my mom, I moved over to live with my dad in high school. And when my dad had me in his house, he kind of got a full range of what was going on academically. And then he was the one that kind of steered me in the right direction to get that under control.
Right.
And to that, I'm extremely grateful for. But he never covered the sports again after the whole debacle that we had with golf. And that he didn't push me after that. Because when I was a lot younger,
right,
he pushed me a little too hard into golf. And that was when I would only spend every other weekend with him. And he asked a lot out of me. And it was just every other weekend us arguing and arguing and arguing.
So this all being said, do you think that there was a healthy balance of pushing? Or do you think there was pushing in the wrong areas?
I think there was pushing in the wrong areas. And in my life experience, I think that there was a lot of other things that were going on that
Family-wise?
yeah,
Yeah.
that it didn't make sense to me logically. Like, why are we focusing on this? Let's not ignore the elephant in the room.
Right.
So I don't think that it was a healthy push
For sports.
for sports.
Yeah.
I don't think that there was a healthy push for academics when I was younger, and when I get older, there was definitely a healthier push in that regard, and it really shaped the way that I became as an adult. So I don't know. I don't think that my childhood was a good example of how I do things. Or maybe it is a good example of how I do things because I see the importance in both areas.
Yeah.
And I know what is good expectations. I know how far I can push my kids. I know their tells. I know that once Preston starts to become extremely emotional, he needs a break.
Right.
I know when Braden starts to hyper fixate and get obsessively concerned about the calendar and needing to know what's going on and what time everything's happening, he needs a little break.
Right.
I know when Max is throwing himself on the for silly things,
No
he
reason at
needs a
all.
break.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I just learned something about you. I didn't know you went to college classes or Madonna or whatever it was, or schoolcraft
I
after
went to school.
schoolcraft after high school
I did.
classes. So
I feel like I told you.
directly after,
I would go home.
yeah,
I
and
would
then you would
take a
go,
nap.
yeah.
I would eat something,
Yeah.
and then I would go to
Oh, I
Scraps.
didn't know that.
And then when I wasn't doing that in the summer, I would go to this old man's house
That's weird.
in his basement, and he was a tutor.
Oh.
And then he, it wasn't anything sketchy. He was a really nice man.
Yeah.
And he would teach me how to read.
That's what they all say.
No, he was legitimately a nice man. His daughter went to high school with me.
Okay.
And it was weird because I knew her.
Right.
And I was
And
like,
the dad was too.
I
Right?
don't know how to
Yeah.
read.
So that's interesting about you and how you were pushed in certain situations and not pushed in the other ones. And it would have been better if there was a little bit of healthier balance there on what they were pushed, or put their foot down and said we're pushing you into everything, or so from my side of things, I was just a stubborn ass as a kid. I'm still stubborn now. So my parents did give me a leeway with certain things, and then when I screwed it up, they would push, and then I'd screw it up even bigger when they pushed, and never really succeeded in any of those, I guess, aspects. I think my parents, especially my mom, was most proud of my track, quote unquote career. She was always at every single track meet.
Which says a lot about her character because those just suck.
They do. They're long
so long
and boring.
Oh my god.
But the one thing, and it kind of irks me to this day, is that my parents let me give up on football. That was the thing. So freshman year of high school, that was my first real experience with tackle football. I was second string quarterback. Our team did well. And after that, some of the kids on the team were bullies, assholes, basically. And the way that, the coach would say it is that if you have a problem with somebody, you settle it on the field. Well, you're talking about the biggest asshole on the team was a linebacker. You're talking about me settling a fight with a linebacker, and I'm a quarterback. How will that happen? How is that really going to fix the situation? That's like, Alex Anzalone Goff going to fight him.
Right.
You tell me who's going to win. Alex is going to win.
Does he have a broken arm at this point?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He'd take his arm off and beat Goff with his
He
arm.
would. He
So,
would.
so that's one thing that I really do wish that I was pushed more into. But I have to say that, I guess I was given more freedom than I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I was actually given more freedom than what I thought as a teenager. I always thought that they were ruining my life.
Yeah, everybody does.
But they did give me more freedom with academics, friends, sports, things I wanted to do. I said I didn't want to do football, and they were fine with it. Now, if I said that I didn't want to do track, that would have been a different story.
Yeah.
So maybe it was the sense of, my mom seeing me get sacked a couple times, hit a few times, where my mom was like, you know what? I'm okay with that. But
Yeah, I can sympathize with that.
yeah,
It's terrifying.
so I do wish that I was pushed more in football. Would I have made it to the professionals? Probably not. But would I enjoyed playing another 3 years in high school and possibly
Yeah.
playing for a local college?
Yeah.
That could have been fun. So a couple takeaways and the conclusion of this episode is understanding the perspectives that fit the needs of your child, whether you think it's more pushing, like Deanna, she was halfway pushed on some things
Yeah.
and not the others, and she wishes that the sports were pushed more. And I didn't mind having that little bit of leeway, but I do wish I was pushed on some aspects that later on I am now very passionate about and look back on, just want to kick myself that
Hmm.
I didn't pursue them anymore. So that kind of leaves us with a question for our listeners is what kind of balance do you think that your child needs? Um, we'd appreciate it if you share your thoughts, your comments. Hopefully you gain something from this, even if it's just a laugh or thinking, oh man, these guys are crazy. I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Um,
You don't know.
we do want to thank you for listening. The next episode's topic's coming out. And what is the next episode?
Matt misses the COVID lockdown.
I do. And you guys will see why.
We'll choose it.
Yeah. So I'm Matt.
I'm Deanna.
Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like, follow, and share us on all the listening platforms and social media. Remember that we are all about finding harmony in the chaos.
Chasing balance. Real life parenting, one conversation at a time.
We'll see you guys later.